The intellectual revival of the Europeans. Throughout the 12th century, there are many signs that the European intelligence was recovering courage and leisure and preparing to take up against the intellectual enterprises of the first Greek scientific inquiries and such speculation as those of the Italian Lucretius. The causes of this revival were many and complex. The suppression of private war, the higher standards of comfort and security that followed the Crusades, and the simulation of men's minds by the experiences of these expeditions were no doubt necessary preliminary conditions. Trade was reviving, cities were recovering case and safety, the standard of education was rising in the church and spreading among laymen. The 13th and 14th centuries were a period of growing independent or quasi independent cities. Venice, Florence, Genoa, Lisbon, Paris, Bruges, uh, London, Antwerp, Hamburg, Nuremberg, Novgorod, Visby, and Bergen, for example, they were all trading cities with many travelers, where men trade and travel, they talk and think. The polemics of the popes and princes, the conspicuous savagery and wickedness of the persecution of heretics were exciting men to doubt the authority of the church and question and discuss the fundamental things. We have seen how the Arabs were the means of restoring Aristotle to Europe, and how such a prince as Frederick II acted as a channel through which Arabic philosophy and science played upon the Renaissance European mind. Still more influential in the stirring up of men's ideas were the Jews. Their very existence was a note of interrogation to the claims of the church. And finally, the secret, fascinating inquiries of the alchemists were spreading far and wide and setting men to petty, furtive, and yet fruitful resumption of experimental science, and the stir in men's mind was by no means confined now to the independent and well educated. The mind of the common man was awake in the world as it had never been before in all the experience of mankind. In spite of priest and persecution, Christianity does seem to be carried a mental ferment wherever its teaching reached. It established a direct relation between conscience of the individual man and the God of righteousness, so that now, if need arose, he had the courage to form his own judgment upon prince or prelate or creed. As early as 11th century, philosophical discussion had begun in Europe. There were great and growing universities at Paris, Oxford, Bologna, and other centers. Their medieval schoolmen took up again and thrashed out a series of questions upon the value of meaning of words that were a necessary preliminary to clear thinking in the scientific age that was to follow. And standing by himself because of his distinctive genius was Roger Bacon, circa 1210 to circa 1293. A Franciscan of Oxford, the father of modern experimental science, his name deserves a prominence in our history second only to that of Aristotle. His writings are one long tirade against ignorance. He told his age it was ignorant and incredibly bold thing to do. Nowadays, a man may tell the world it as silly as it is so solemn, but all that all its methods are still infantile and clumsy, and its dogmas childish assumptions without much physical danger. But these peoples of the Middle Age, when they are not actually being massacred or starving or dying of pestilence, were passionately convinced of the wisdom, the completeness, and finality of their beliefs, and disposed to meet in any reflection upon them very bitterly. Roger Bacon's writings were like a flash of light in the profound darkness. He combined his attack upon the ignorance of his times with a wealth of suggestion for the increase of knowledge in his passionate insistence upon the need of experiment and of collecting knowledge. The spirit of Aristotle lives again in him. Experiment, experiment. That is the burden of Roger Bacon. The revolution and famine in Russia, but a good year and more before the collapse of the Central Powers, the half Oriental monarchy of Russia, which had professed to be the continuation of the Byzantine Empire, had collapsed. The Tsardom had been showing signs of profound rottenness for some years before the war. The court was under the sway of his fantastic religious impostor Rasputin, and the public administration, civil and military, was in a state of extreme inefficiency and corruption. At the outset of the war, there was a great flare of patriotic enthusiasm in Russia. A vast conscript army was called up, for which there was either adequate military equipment nor a proper supply of competent officers, and this great host, ill supplied and badly handled, was hurled against the German and Austrian frontiers. There can be no doubt that the early presence of Russian armies in East Prussia in September 1914 diverted the energies and attention of the Germans from their first victorious drive upon Paris. The sufferings and deaths of scores of thousands of ill-fed, ill-led Russian peasants saved France from complete overthrow in the momentous opening campaign, and made all Western Europe the debtors of the great and tragic people. But the strain of the war upon his sprawling, ill-organized empire was too heavy for its strength. The Russian common soldiers were sent into battle without gains, no support them to support them without even rifle ammunition. They were wanted by their officers and generals in a delirium of militarist enthusiasm. For a time, they seemed to be suffering mutely as the beasts suffer, but there is a limit to the endurance even of the most ignorant. A profound disgust for Sardom was creeping through these armies of betrayed and wasted men. From the close of 1915 onward, Russia was a source of deepening anxiety to her Western allies. Throughout 1916, she managed largely on the defensive, and there were rumors of a separate peace with Germany. On September 29, 1916, the monk Rasputin was murdered at a dinner party in Petrograd, and a brilliant attempt was made to put the Tsardom in order. By March, things were moving rapidly. Food riots in Petrograd developed into revolutionary insurrection. There was an attempted suppression of the Duma, the representative body. There were attempted arrests of liberal leaders, the formation of the provisional government under Prince Lvov, and an abdication of a provisional government and an abdication March 15 by the Tsar. For a time, it seemed that a moderate and controlled revolution might be possible under a new Tsar. Then it became evident that the destruction of the popular confidence in Russia had gone too far for any such adjustments. The Russian people were sick to death of the old order of things in Europe and wars of great power. The Allies had no understanding of Russian realities. Their diplomats were ignorant of the Russian genteel persons, with their attention directed to the Russian court rather than to Russia. They blundered steadily with the new situation. Granville Barker, new woman as moral genius. As an able director and actor, Granville Barker became a worthy exponent of new drama, and the synergy of his collaboration with Shaw offered the audience drama of great merit. At a professional level, they were both playwright and critic, and in personal life, they were Fabians and collaborators who worked towards the creation of new drama destined to displace the commercial theatre of the day. Endowed with impressionable and romantic temperaments, they depended heavily on women for their creativity. In both cases, fathers played as insignificant role in early life. Dominant mothers molded their characters and careers. Their professional success owes much to the new women of the stage. In spite of the resemblance and intellectual indebtedness, Granville Barker was too much of an individualist to be treated as either Shaw's shadow or his dramatic discipline. As a propagandist, Shaw used his characters as brilliant exponents of his ideas, but but Barker, essentially a director, created probable situations which enabled his characters to live the ideas. Their women characters are as different as their treatment of sexuality is varied. While Shavian women are the embodiment of energy and enterprise, Granville Barker's women are the epitome of all that aesthetic culture can do to a woman. The introvert women of his plays draws their inspiration from an inner spiritual strength, while Shavian women dominate the plays by virtue of their superior intellect and willpower. The common trait is the courage to fight male oppression and social evils. In the marrying of Anne Lee, Granville Barker used the contemporary phrase "the new woman" to describe Anne, the uncompromising young lady of the late 18th century. The anachronism, this anachronism confirms his concern for the women's position. The new woman needs a new world to expand their mental horizon. Unlike the typical timid woman of Victorian age, she can take big risks, which implies defying social conventions and facing social censor for one's personal convictions. In place of the intellectual dynamism of Shavian women, we have a woman who is well balanced and nearly always happy, and to crown her maturity, she is endowed with a faith to go on. This resilience makes them a class apart. Each woman fights against a powerful and deep rooted tradition. Shaw's acquaintance with Granville Barker began with the fruitful collaboration for the staging of the admirable Bashville in 1903 at Court Theatre, and further deepened with Granville Barker playing the parts of Marchbanks and Tanner. The friendship and intimacy fueled the ideal speculation that Granville Barker was Shaw's natural son. To Shaw, Barker as actor was less admirable than the author of The Marrying of Anne Lee, which he regarded as the finest bit of literature and exquisite play. In fact, Barker's reputation as a critic, the director and actor obscured his contribution to modern drama. Of his 7 plays, only 4, 3 comedies and a tragedy, are known to the public. Modern evaluation is slowly beginning to regard him as a major playwright of beauty and subtlety who probed the depths of the human soul. However, his treatment of sexuality and the portrayal of the new heroine have not been subjected to close scrutiny. Like his contemporaries, Barker believed in libido as the main spring of most human activities and also the root of nervous illness. He also seems to describe to the theory of sublimation of sexual energy. Despite his protest, it is not unlikely for Granville Barker to be influenced by Shaw. 18 of those whose plays he directed for the hundreds of performances, and like Shaw, he believed that the living conditions of the masses must be improved before art and culture could flourish. Women's issues are his recurring themes because they are the integral part of social progress.